Hey, welcome back to Twin Cities Live. Okay, we're already talking about this nonstop in the break, boundaries, which is a term that we hear a lot these days. I love boundaries.
I like them.
They
I
make
like them
me
a lot.
happy. Perhaps you've thought about this with some of your own family members. Some of us are better at boundaries than others.
It helps to know what boundaries are and what they are not.
Yeah.
Here to help us to do that is psychologist Dr. Karen Ryan with Nystrom and Associates. Okay, we've been talking in the break about
Yes.
boundaries and how that looks in relationships. Let's first, though, talk about what are boundaries? What is that even?
What are boundaries? Yeah, what do we mean? Boundaries are where I begin and end and where you begin and end, where there's a line kind of between two people. I think that's really helpful to like kind of visualize it that way. And it's being able to be like, I have my own feelings, my wants, my needs, my opinions, my own emotions, and you have yours. You have your emotions, your needs, your opinions, your thoughts. And boundaries are also about kind of personal space as well. So it ties into like physical space, emotional, intellectual, and it's saying like that I have my own stuff, you have your own stuff, and where do I begin and end?
Yours.
Yeah, mine and yours.
Which is
Exactly.
helpful because you can find yourself like if you're feeling responsible, like say I'm feeling responsible for your emotions,
Yep.
like I need to work on that boundary, not necessarily you needing to work on that boundary
Yeah.
because I need to remember like what am I responsible for managing, which is
Right.
my own self,
Yes.
not your own self.
Yeah, another way we can think about boundaries is what we let in and what we take on. So exactly what you're saying, you might take on my boundaries and I might try, my emotions, and I might try to put mine on you
Yeah.
as well. So it goes both ways, where I might not have boundaries, then I might put my emotional needs on you.
Right.
And then it's your job to say, and then it's my job to say, oh, I have to take care
This
of
is
myself.
my own stuff.
To be clear,
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
do this with Dr. Ryan, but I may or may not do it with my husband on occasion.
That's okay. He's related to you. Okay, so
tried.
we need to know, though, first what types of boundaries there are, because there's not just one and done. There are all sorts of different boundaries that we need to be aware of.
Exactly. There's many different types of boundaries, and we'll talk probably about 6 today, right? The first one is our physical boundaries. So physical boundaries are our physical space. And when we think about physical boundaries, it's do we feel comfortable giving this person a hug? Do we want to give them a handshake? How close do we stand to people? When we have a bedroom, like, do we want to have that personal space where people just barge in? Do we knock? And so it's really about kind of personal space and with our bodies.
Yeah.
And so that might be different for different people and with different people.
And it might shift in time because like with your kids, like when they're really little,
you
you
just
don't
walk
they're
right
gonna
in.
barge in or whatever, or you're
Yes.
gonna do the same to them. But you have to be evaluating that might shift as they get older.
My girls are in their teenagers now. We knock every door we knock at because, you know, they need privacy
Yeah.
as they get older. So the
And-
boundary
and
does change.
It does change, and it gives that sense of safety and security, and that
Yes.
you have the right to your own space, like especially physically. And I think that's such an important thing when we think about like that safety and space. You bet.
Okay, so then the other ones are like emotional and intellectual and mental. I mean, those are separate, but they're less physical. It's more about your mindset.
Yeah, we talked about the emotional just a minute ago, and that's really about your emotional needs and kind of really taking that time to think about I'm responsible for my own emotional needs, and so are my loved ones. And so it's tapping in, and if you're feeling like your needs aren't being validated or recognized or seen as important, that's when a boundary violation might be for those emotional boundaries.
Okay.
And then the mental, what we talked about, or intellectual, is really about like your beliefs and your ideas. Do you have the right to have your own beliefs, your own
Sure.
ideas, your own thoughts?
Yes.
I think about this with my daughters, and sometimes my daughter would be like, well, what do you like, Mom? And I'm like, well, I want you to answer first because I want to have that boundary of you pick what you like and I'll pick what I like. But you can see it's unhealthy when somebody's trying to push their beliefs, their wants, their needs, their thoughts on you.
You know, my youngest
Yeah.
does this. She really wants to make sure that I'm okay with whatever's happening in the situation. I never looked at that as a boundary issue. I just thought maybe it was just her being a warrior.
This is why she's so good.
And there's that permeable piece, right? Because kids really don't have that. We call it like a
Right.
membrane, or so much of us is a part of them. And as they
Right.
get older, that's when it's like becomes more of the independent
you want them to form
self.
their own
And so
thoughts
that's
and
that when you can
feelings.
foster that. It's a boundary and that independence. Yeah.
Material is a big one. We
Yeah.
work on this in our house because my son Franklin cannot stand it when someone takes a drink out of the water cup that has been assigned
Oh.
to him. The rest
The
of the kids
backwash.
are like, whatever, I'll take your water bottle, we'll take this. But Franklin loses his mind, and so
Yeah.
we have to help support him in that boundary.
Yeah, that's a really important boundary to him, that he has his own thing, that
Yes.
it's not going to be violated, it's not going to be taken. And so, yes, the material boundaries are it's oftentimes about money and about possessions,
Yeah.
but especially for money. That's something where it can be really hard. We can find ourselves in this pattern of giving to other people or feeling like, oh, they don't have it, so I need to give it to them. And then we can find ourselves feeling like with difficulties herself. And so that's when we need to have that boundary of finances or material things. And like you said, it's different for different people.
I know.
And so it's taking that time to know what it is, and then as adults articulate it the best we can.
Okay, all right, so how do we know if our boundaries are in a healthy place? Just like I didn't know that was a boundary issue with my daughter, always making sure, Mom, are you okay with this? It's a boundary issue that I now realize. So what are the key words we should be looking for?
I think of one of the first ones is pressure. Do you feel pressure to do things or say things or be places you don't want to be? Right, so that's if like time is another boundary. And so if you feel like your time's being eaten up and you feel this pressure to do things that you don't want to do. The other word is resentment. This is when I have to tap in with. I'm like, oh, I'm starting to feel resentful about something. And that's oftentimes when I have not been honoring my own boundaries and my own needs. I might not have been giving myself my own time or my privacy or some of those things that are important to me. And another key word that I like is respect. When we feel like we have healthy boundaries, we feel respected.
Yeah.
We feel like we're respecting ourselves and that others are respecting us. So like when you don't drink out of his cup, he feels respected.
Yes.
And that's a boundary is there. When you knock on the door and wait to come in, that's showing respect and honoring those boundaries. And so I think respect is a good word.
Okay,
for
and
knowing
then
when they're healthy.
I think going through these, like we just put up the sexual boundaries there too, all of those 6 that you talked about. I mean, people don't know how to respect your boundaries if you don't even know what your boundaries are.
Yeah, and so it's really taking that time to kind of recognize what they are and think about it in your own life of like, where do I feel violated? Where do I feel like I don't have that ability to say no or when I take things on? And there's certain people that make that more difficult. You know, is there somebody that makes sexual jokes all the time and kind of makes you uncomfortable and makes comments? That might be a sexual boundary that's being violated. And so having those different types in our mind really helps us then recognize when they're not being honored.
You know, the one thing I found is that if you can surround yourself with other women, I think in particular, who support those boundaries, you will just be so set up for success. I had to message some friends about something that I couldn't do. We were going to host a party on the 4th of July, which we've done in the past. I texted my neighbor and said, like, we're not going to be able to do it. I've got these things going on. And she was like, I'm so proud of you for doing that. And I thought, okay, Naomi, you are a real friend, because it wasn't like, oh, not a guilt trip, I'm so sorry. It was, I'm so proud of you for
miss the party this year.
Yes, and if you want to do it again, I know she'll think of like, how could I help more to do it? It's amazing how people react to it.
And it's amazing how much we can improve our friends' lives when we honor their boundaries. Like a simple like, yes, I totally understand, take care of yourself, we'll see you next time.
Yes.
How that like helps us all have better boundaries.
I feel like we're all best friends.
Listen,
this is great. We love when she's here.
She's the gift that keeps on giving. It's
She's
really
wonderful.
great.
I'll hang out anytime.
I know,
Great.
and she's a real therapist. Like, these are who therapists are, guys. They're not
This is
creepy
great.
people who say like, lay on the couch, tell me all your dark secrets. It's like, let's help you enjoy your life more.
Oh my God.
So great. So
Doctor, so great.
Nystrom and Associates, which we talk about all the time, they're so wonderful. They provide care in the fields of family therapy, psychiatry, psychology, and more. They have 20 locations in the Twin Cities.
And they work with couples, families, and people of all ages. So if you're struggling with stress, anxiety, depression, or addiction, please reach out to them today.